Hey folks, let's get back to chatting about recreational drugs. This video we're focusing on stimulants, specifically cocaine and meth. Alright, so let's crank it up a notch. In this lesson we'll focus mostly on two different types of stimulants, cocaine and methamphetamines. But it's important to know that there's lots of different types. Caffeine, nicotine, Adderall, all are stimulants, and in high doses all of them can cause problems. So this lesson we'll talk about the pathophysiology of cocaine and meth overdoses. We'll look at the sympathomimetic toxicity versus the very similar serotonin syndrome, and we'll talk about what to do when you find a patient who's jacked up on this stuff. Cocaine is derived from an aldehyde found in the coca plant. Specifically, it's from the leaves. It's been used medicinally for years for a variety of conditions like toothaches, headaches, lethargy, altitude sickness, and it was famously used in Coca-Cola until 1903. It's primarily a stimulant, stimulating the sympathetic receptors and blocking dopamine, norepi, and serotonin reuptake mechanisms. It also has some sodium channel blocking effects, which makes it a great local anesthetic. And as such, sometimes can have some cardiac and ECG effects, which are similar to tricyclic antidepressant overdoses. Lastly, cocaine also affects the clotting cascade, starting platelet aggregation, and can increase the risk of developing a thrombus and even leading to DIC. It's one of the most commonly used drugs in the world, though over the years it has been decreasing. A 2006 US study showed that 1% of the population in the US has reported using cocaine at some point, either recreationally or as a performance enhancer. So cocaine can be taken in a variety of ways. The most popular is snorting the processed powder, but it can also be injected, inhaled as crack cocaine, taken topically or orally. Like all drugs, the route will affect the severity, onset, and duration of the symptoms, but typically, cocaine will start working immediately, and the effects will last up to an hour. Symptoms of cocaine toxicity are agitation, tachycardia, tachypnea, hypertension, CNS stimulation, and hyperthermia. At high doses, severe aggression, psychosis, and even seizures are common. Because of the sodium channel blocking effects, often these patients will be in a wide complex tachycardia like VTach, or having runs of VT. Hyperthermia is a real concern, and be on the watch for exertional heat stroke. Lastly, keep hydration and sodium status in mind, as these patients will likely be dehydrated, but you can also think about EAH. Amphetamines are an interesting type of drug. Like cocaine, they work by increasing the amount of catecholamines in the sympathetic nervous system, particularly norepi, epi, and serotonin. It doesn't directly affect the CNS system like cocaine, but increases the concentration of the neurotransmitter outside the synapse, causing the sympathomimetic effects. It also doesn't have the reuptake inhibitor effects or the sodium channel blocking effects like cocaine does. However, the duration of action is much longer. While cocaine has a half-life of about 1 hour, methamphetamines are closer to 12-hour half-life. With your patient having an increased sympathetic system and increased dopamine levels for that long, you can expect more of the adverse side effects of methamphetamines like hyperthermia, psychosis, dehydration, electrolyte imbalances, and metabolic acidosis. So where are you going to find these amphetamines? Well, they're actually pretty commonly prescribed. Historically, we'd see them as stimulants, with soldiers and workers taking them to keep themselves up for long hours. Eventually, they moved into the psychiatric world, and they're commonly seen today in ADHD meds, like Adderall. Recreationally, homemade meth is more common, and it's relatively easy to make meth from things like ephedrine found in cough suppressants. For the record, please don't try and make meth. Apart from being highly illegal, it's also really dangerous, and the process is super flammable and combustible. So the issue with homemade meth labs, apart from being a scene safety issue, is that these drugs are often made incorrectly or mixed with other drugs, and users often don't know what they're taking. There's been loads of cases of bad batches of methamphetamines, which has led to mass hospitalizations and even death. Alright, so let's walk through a scenario to finish this up. You're called downtown to a seedy area for a 28-year-old male. He's outside of the house, screaming and kicking. You've determined there's no weapons around, but this guy is definitely a danger to himself and others. What do? Well, the first thing is call for backup. Police are trained to physically restrain people, so they would be my first call, but my second would be for an ACP. Physical restraints are great for an emergency measure to keep everyone safe, but patients shouldn't be left fighting for any real length of time. it increases their risk of causing trauma to themselves, as well as causing some severe rhabdomyolysis, which can exacerbate a lot of other problems down the line. So best treatment for the patient and us is to get some chemical sedation on board. Benzodiazepines like Ativan or Versed are generally the go-to treatment across the board for the agitated patient. So you'll commonly see those being given. Be cautious with your antipsychotic meds like Haldol, as these drugs can increase the serotonin levels and make your patient worse. Once the patient is calm enough, get a full set of vitals, including a 12-lead ECG. Get an IV with some fluids if the patient looks dry. Thinking about EAH, and you may need to start some cooling for hyperthermia. In hospital, they'll look at some further treatments tailored to the patient, like sodium bicarb for any acidosis or ECG changes.